Hey folks, my name's Kevin and it's time for a little bit more knife nerdery, and today we're unboxing a knife that doesn't belong to me even though technically I did buy it. I am proxying this knife for my friend Casper over in Norway. Some companies just won't ship to Norway. You might remember him because I bought this off of him. This is the Urban EDC Supply Company Workerman Segaiha wave pattern version of the Pena X Series Apache. And yeah, that is quite the mouthful, but I bought this off him. I really wanted it, and he sold it to me because he said it was a little bit too pretty for him. You might also remember him popping up on my channel because I have another Apache. This one is another knife that I proxied for him because Pena wouldn't ship directly to him. This is the ebony wood handled version of the large Apache, and you might be wondering, if I shipped it to him, why do I have it in my hands right now? Well, just like this, he decided that this was a little bit too pretty for him. And even though it went from, China, from Riyadh to wherever the heck Pena lives, I think somewhere in the Southwest, to me in Oregon, all the way to Norway, it has now come all the way back from Norway because I desperately wanted one of these. And yeah, we came to a little agreement. Kind of a traderoo, if you will. I don't know. Anyway, he wanted a very specific version of the Bugout that you can only get through Benchmade's customizer tool. And the customizer tool doesn't allow you to ship to Norway at checkout. And so, yeah, we figured this out. So what's in here is, in fact, a Bugout. So we're going to use my only Benchmade to open this up because, yeah, I'm not really that into Benchmades. So let's see. I've had numerous friends try to get me into the Bugout over the years, and I've just never really cared. I've held one, but like that's it. I've held one at a dealer, and I've just never really been super excited about it. But the big reason why I hated the version that I had in hand at a dealer is because it was the FRN scales. It just left such a bad taste in my mouth that I couldn't handle that. So this today might finally convince me because what we have here is a custom Bugout in 20 CV and in specifically titanium scales. I believe I'm gonna have to cut a thing right there. Let's get that back out. Trying to cut that without cutting the box. There we are. One of the other things that I'm doing, not just going to open this up and proxy it to him, but I live in Oregon. I live very close to Benchmade, so I also can basically QC this a little bit. The stuff from their custom shop tends to have a little bit better QC in terms of blade centering and everything like that, but it's really easy for me to get this sent back to them just in case anything does go wrong. Anyone can, but it's so easy for me to drop it off. Oh, yeah. Wow, that is still tremendously light. Okay, let's pop this out. Although I'll put that back in for shipping. Wow. Wow, I am blown away by how light this still is. Look at that. Yeah, this is actually already a much more me knife, just feeling it in hand. The regular FRN version of this is, I think, like 1.8 ounces or something. They made a aluminum handle version that is 2.5. I'm not normally someone who measures stuff in my videos, but I'm definitely going to do that right now to get a sense of how light this is, because honestly, I was expecting it to be heavier feeling. This feels very, very light. 2.52. So this is the same as the aluminum handled versions. That's kind of nuts, actually. Okay, so this is very light for a 3.25 inch blade. Okay, this is a little bit stiff. They tend to always come very, very stiff. I assume if I pull this back, it's not going to fall. So this is going to need to be tuned. Can I flick it like this? Easily. Can I reverse flick it like this? Easily. But it is definitely tight. Well, might as well try to tune that right away. I have found, oh no, these are T10s, aren't they? I have found that nearly every Benchmade I have ever handled that is fresh has come too tight. And so they always need this just backed out a little bit. Ooh, wow, that is... That is thread locked. Okay, well, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to risk scratching this, but I do really want this to be a little bit looser. Okay, well, I will not do that in this video then, and I will talk to Casper about that. In general, though, let's look at this. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you were in the knife world at all, you have seen a Bugout a billion times, and so I don't think you're going to be seeing anything new on this screen that you haven't seen before, but I am personally blown away at the lightness of this. Let's see if we can get something to shine back up and show the amount of skeletonization going on. Yeah, it's like completely hollow. So what you'll see, let me zoom in. Like any Bugout, you're going to have the partial liners right there. That's the metal liners that facilitate the way the axis lock works. The axis lock, this bar has to be blockaded by something in the vertical direction, and it's this liner part here that's made out of steel. Even on like a tie version like this, it's made out of steel for strength reasons, and that liner needs to really only exist up here. You'll find that on some of the they do this on other versions now too, but on the 20CV versions of the mini Griptilian, they actually extended those liners to go all the way back. So that's now something that runs all the entire length of the knife, and you can see there's no milling there, which is why this is kind of heavy. But the regular versions of the Griptilian, back in the day at least, also just had a partial liner that extended out to that back screw. Here, you can see that it sits into this cavity that then spreads basically the entire rest of the knife. There is a little bit of a ridge right there, but this entire freaking thing is hollowed out. And the exact same thing's happening on this side. It is just one giant hollow cavity, a little line, and another giant hollow cavity. So that's how they're getting this thing to be so shockingly light. So one of the other reasons why it's really light is because it has thin blade stock, and that is fantastic. One of the reasons why I've personally not been super jumping to get one of these is because I already have knives with really thin blade stock. I have both a Neutron and an Atom, and hey, by the way, tie scales, and those are famous for having 0.09 inch blade stock, so 90 thousandths. A lot of knives are up at around 120 to 140 thousandths, and those would still be considered normal knives. 120 considered thin. So 90 thousandths is super duper thin and slicey. So it's not, since I'm so spoiled by just having had these for a while and having a bunch of ones, even like my Quiet Carry Waypoint or Drift, for example, or that same thin blade stock, it's not been something that's like so revolutionary to me that this would have a thin blade stock, but I love to see other companies doing it. So it's fantastic to see that Benchmade does versions of knives in such thin blade stock. I wish that they would do it on more knives, not just ones aimed specifically at this ultra light category. I wish that this would, let me play with this action. A little bit of lock stick right there. I could also just work this a whole bunch and I would eventually, but yeah, it's really stiff. What else can we look at on this knife? How did they do on this grind? Not too shabby. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty consistent throughout. You can see that there is a little bit of a smiling happening right here. This is interesting. I've never actually looked at one of these up close enough to see that the plunge grind extends all the way to the end right here. So you have this sharpening choil, but the plunge grind, the thing that brings it from the full flatness down to the thinness behind the edge, is ending right about there, which is why we're seeing this little bit of a downward smile. This is the same thing as a smile. It's just rather than the bevel getting thicker in a way that's extending upward, it's extending downward a little bit. So it's a tiny little micro recurve at the tip. Well, that's surprising to see, but I guess maybe not. I'm going to wipe down this blade because it's kind of oiled from them. I got these Renegade EDC wool hanks, and they're just perfect for this kind of task. What else is there to say about a Bugout? This has always bugged me. This is a design thing you'll see in a bunch of different knives, but I personally hate it. I think it just looks bad, but it also has just the potential. I mean, it's not often that you're holding the knife in your hand like this when it's closed, but it introduces just this jabby corner that you just don't need to necessarily have, and it could potentially snag on your pocket or something like that as you're sliding in and out. In practice, most people find that it doesn't, and the fact that this slopes out right here means that your pocket's kind of getting pushed off to the side, but if you were angling this kind of odd, you could snag like that. So the reason why it has to be like this on this particular knife is because of where the lock bar placement is. It's an axis lock knife, not the lock bar, sorry, the stop pin. Because it's an axis lock knife, they have to have this channel here for the bar, the axis bar, whatever you want to call this, lock bar, I don't know, slide back and forth. And that means that they have to put the stop pin in front of that. Now, if you think about where this stop pin actually is though, does it need to be in this top corner? Because they have all of this space right here that they could move it slightly further back. Moving that slightly further back would allow them to extend the blade tang further back to meet it, which means, could they? Well, they couldn't fill this whole gap the way it's designed right now. They would have to fill that entire space, move it that entire distance back, and that they couldn't do. But they could make it slightly less of a gap than they have right now by just positioning this a little bit further back. But that is entirely an aesthetic thing, because I think any kind of functional complaint about it is really kind of convoluted and not really something that you'd address in regular life. What else is there to say about a Bugout? This particular configuration, you know, if you use the configurator tool, and the studs and your clip will be the same, I think. These screws will match there, but these screws will match whatever is there. And my friend Casper specifically wanted these parts to be silver and these parts to be black. And yeah, honestly, I think it came out really, really nice. I think it's a nice cohesive build. Oh, that's what it is. Like the thumb stud and the back barrel spacers will match. I personally am not a lanyard person, so I like the aftermarket scales that don't have a lanyard hole whatsoever. But again, we've all seen this knife so many, just trillions and billions of times, that I've gotten very, very used to seeing this. And so it doesn't really even bug me all that much anymore. It's nice to see that they have the clip screws on the other side, but it would be cool in the configurator tool to say, hey, I'm right-handed. I know I'm not going to want these. Don't mill mine. Don't tap mine for left-handed carry. What else would I say about this knife? I would say, like, I'm annoyed that I can't tune this easily right now, but this is super smooth. There's no, grittiness or anything bad feeling in the washer action, and this is actually pretty smooth. Usually axis lock knives, so this bar is riding on this back part right there, and usually that has a little bit of a gritty feeling because it's just running this whole way. I was really pleased when I got my TRM Shadow that is an axis style lock that they actually polished this back surface. They polished it to a near mirror, which meant that from the get-go this was always super duper smooth. So I was expecting this to be a little bit rougher, but they actually did a pretty darn good job. That's a very nice smooth action right there. Let's get a little bit nerdy for a moment. If you look at the way that an axis lock works, there's this flat bar at the back right here. Then there's a little bit of a slope. That little bit of a slope means that it makes it so that the axis bar doesn't actually, this sliding lock bar doesn't actually move all the way to the front. So if you look at it in the closed position, you can see where this sits. And if you look at it in the open position, it's just ever so slightly further back. Let's see if I can show you with zoom in. You see how we're not actually at the front of that channel yet. That's because the very subtle amount of slope that's happening right there is engaging with this and preventing it from actually going in. The reason for going all the way forward, the reason for that is to let it increase the lifespan of the lock. As this slides in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out over years, it will very, very slowly work its way further and further up that ramp, and it has room to travel forward. If they, while still preventing up and down rotational motion. A lot of axis style knives do get up and down blade play at some point. It's not the kind of thing that risks the lock failing because of the nature of how axis style locks have the lock bar completely impeding the flow right there. So it's not like a risk, but it just becomes kind of a bit of an annoyance when you get up and down rock. There's none on this knife right now, but that little tiny bit of ramp there is one of the ways that they get around that, because if they had the bar all the way to the front and it wore in anymore, then you'd have the opportunity for it to introduce a little bit of play. And that little tiny bit of a ramp keeps it in a subtle wedge position, which gets rid of that. Let's talk about other things that are going on with the axis lock. If you look at the way that this is, this looks like it's like a sphere, like it'd be a circular shape that's a consistent radius around. And on some axis style locks it is, in some axis, like actual name brand axis locks it is, and some it isn't. Let's see how this one operates. You can see that whether or not it's consistently a particular radius or not by watching whether or not this bar will move, because this bar is being held in place by the back of that tang. So if the radius of that tang is bigger or smaller, then it'll push this further or out or come back in. And so we can see it's staying perfectly in place. And right there it starts to move. And then it gradually raises up and then bumps over. So what we're seeing is that it is nearly perfect radius and then slowly increases the size of the radius, and so pushing this out and out and out and out until it gets to that final hump that acts as the detent. Now if we come over here and look at this guy, this is the shadow, you can see if we do that exact same thing, try and keep this very still, it looks this looks very similar. It's really hard to see. It's actually moving the entire way. It's just moving super duper slow. I think if I move a little bit faster, you can kind of see. So on the shadow, the radius is subtly ramping the entire path and then pops down. Now, for comparison, this is a super duper cheap budget knife that I bought. I was trying to find the single cheapest axis style lock, and yeah, it is not in any way subtle that they are trying to ape the Bugout. Like that blade shape is very clearly trying to be the Bugout. But I felt okay enough buying this $24 sorta knockoff because it's not like an exact literal clone. I was trying to find the cheapest axis style lock I could for a future project that I'm going to keep under wraps for now. A little experiment that I'm going to do for a video and try and tinker with this. I wanted something cheap because I'm probably going to end up destroying it. But it's not like a complete clone. I didn't want to get just one of those, like Ganzo where they take a Ontario Rat #2 and just slap an axis lock on it. IP theft is bad. Anyway, where I was going is if you look at the way that this one works, if we hold this in place and then slide this, you can see that it does not move at all. This entire path, it's not increasing its radius further away. It's not till we get to the very end, all the way over here, that we finally fall back in. So you can see it doesn't even do that kind of ramp thing. Like right there at the very end, just a tiny bit. But it's a much smaller distance. And the thing about the way that this travel does, like why would I care about any of this? Why am I talking about all of this? The reason is because when you're closing the knife, if you're closing the knife in a way where you are pulling back on the axis bar and just letting it fall, Great. You've removed all friction from the thing. Fantastic. This in particular one is on bearings, so it's ultra free flowy, which is honestly, I'm going to say this is legitimately an impressive knife for the price point in general. It's just kind of a pretty decent budget knife. But yeah, if you pull this back, you're going to have it fall. But if you don't and you try and shake the blade closed, well, what's going to prevent you from going down? Yeah, there is friction from the bar, but the fact that this bar has to get pushed out means the spring has to get compressed for it to get over this final hump and be able to slide back up. And so if you take that compression of this spring and you condense it all to the very, very end and make it so that it's, has just friction, and then has to compress a spring, what you get is this kind of bouncing thing. And so if you try and close this knife, it does this a lot where you just kind of can't. If you get it at the top and you shake it, you can shake it down to the bottom. But then you can't, it's hard. You have to really kind of shake it to get it over that final hump. It'll just kind of sit here and do this over and over. And that's specifically because at the very end of this path of travel, it's trying to do all of that spring compression. So if you come over here to this version where they're spreading that spring compression out over the entire thing, it's like having a really long ramp rather than a really slow one. So if I try and swing this closed, wow, trying to do this under a camera is really hard. There. I mean, it probably looked like I was doing it. Man, trying to do this under a camera. This one is, wow, it's not a good demo, but trust me, when I'm not under a camera and I can actually move this one you can swing closed, and this one will just kind of bounce indefinitely. Let's see how this operates. I think it's unfair because there's so much tightness right here that I don't think this is really going to be a fair comparison. Oh no, yeah, I can't even show you, because this is so freaking tight. Okay, well, pretend that this was loose and I could show you that. The idea is that by the more you spread that compression out, the less resistance it takes per unit of travel at the end, and it's easier to swing closed. And so this is the subtle kind of design differences you'll find in a Axis style lock knife that make it behave one way or another. Okay, this video is way longer than it needs to be, especially because that didn't even work trying to show it. So, I don't know, how do I feel about this? It's tough because I can't play with it in that kind of fun way, and so I want to. Maybe I'm starting to break it in just enough that I can start to do that. Okay, yeah. It's tough to, like, part of the whole fun of Axis locks is that they are kind of fun knives because you can just kind of fidget with them. You can flip it open and then drop it closed, and flip it open and drop it closed, and you can even just pull that back. And oh man, doing things under a camera, you can do stuff like that. And so, like, I would probably be liking this experience more if this wasn't so tight and it was easy for me to adjust it, because that is part of the whole fun. But I will say I am legitimately so much more interested in this knife now that it has these rigid but still exceptionally lightweight scales. This is a much more me knife. I'm still just not excited about this knife in a way that's going to make me want to run out and grab one, but this does show me that a titanium handle bug out is pretty darn cool. And yeah, maybe. Hey, Ian, I know you have tried to convince me a million times. Ian, I might get a bug out now. I don't know. Anyway, my friend Casper is going to be very pleased. I'm going to talk with him about getting this. I mean, honestly, it's starting to loosen up right now, but I'm going to talk with him about tuning this a little bit more. I don't personally see any QC issues that I would need to address. I will say that there is a bit of an unevenness in the stonewash right there, but I'll take a much closer look at this before I say the QC is good. But right now I don't see anything going wrong. There's no play in any direction. And yeah, anyway, this has been a very long video that I wasn't expecting to be this long. But thanks for watching, and Casper, I'll get this out to you very, very soon.